found out was that violence was the main theme. Of the 47 most popular video games, this is based on Nintendo Power polls.
Fear is that other boys in other American high schools will train on the same game and kill more.
Video games have come a long way in being recognized as a legitimate form of entertainment in the same light as books, music, or films. Particularly when it comes to the right to express oneself through electronic media, video games have a long history of scrutiny in the public eye. Many people think today that video games are nothing more than time wasters, and place emphasis on recent studies related to video game addiction. But many others point to the various depictions of graphic violence being showcased in gameplay. I've talked about a few anti-video game activists on this channel before, but the one name which is always being mentioned or quoted is Jack Thompson. From the early 1980s to the late 2010s, the Florida state attorney would make a name for himself and gain public fame and attention nationwide for his crusade against violent video games. As an anti-video game activist, Jack Thompson would stir up a hornet's nest of trouble. He did this through frequent lawsuits against major million-dollar video game, entertainment, and retail companies, along with creating lasting feuds between lawyers, judges, and anyone who challenged him or called him out for his unprofessional conduct. And Jack Thompson would justify his actions by his mission to regulate the video game industry, regardless of how they made him appear in the public eye. Was Jack Thompson a real public crusader, or was he simply a societal menace who did more harm than good? Within this video, I aim to guide you through the career of one of the most controversial public figures of all time. Jack Thompson's career as a lawyer and activist is complex when you consider all the feuds he's maintained over the last 3 decades. Furthermore, it wouldn't be fair to just label him as simply an anti-video game activist. Rather, Jack's had a grudge against everything and everyone that didn't fit his conservative Christian standards. He was a person who never kept his negative thoughts on the subject to himself.
The American Psychological Association is ignorant.
You're apparently too rude to even listen to the answer to your question. Good. Those studies show correlations between watching video games and violence. They do not show causation.
No.
And
most people would say he was outspoken, but in this case, Jack Thompson's opinion on the subject was always prompted by larger goals, and that was to make whoever his opponent was look as terrible as he could. In this short documentary, we uncovered the mesmerizing journey of a man who took on the gaming industry and sparked a wave of heated debates and controversies. Before we dive into the career of Jack Thompson, make sure you subscribe to Smoking Fiend Productions in order to check out more of my videos and my daily live streams.
I think there are a lot of people in the video game industry who actually have a hatred for what you represent. They see you as infringing on freedom. They see you as infringing on choices. What do you have to say to that?
I don't want to take away their options. I just want to make sure they have no options.
Jack B. Thompson was born on July 25, 1951 in Cleveland, Ohio. In his teen years, he attended the local Cuyahoga Falls High School. Upon graduation, he was accepted into Denison University, where he majored in pre-law, along with hosting his own political talk show on the Denison University radio station. Upon graduating Denison, he attended Vanderbilt University Law School in Nashville, Tennessee. It was here where he would meet his future wife, Patricia, who was also studying to become a lawyer. The young couple were married on May 15, 1976 in Patricia's hometown of Hudson, Wisconsin, the very day of their graduation. While away on their honeymoon in Miami, Florida, they decided that they would move to the Key Biscayne, an island area located in the Miami-Dade County, Florida area. In the summer of 1976, both he and his wife studied to pass the Florida bar exam, a requirement for all lawyers to legally practice law in the state of their residence. While his wife maintained employment at a local law firm, Jack remained unemployed until the following year. Meanwhile, both he and his wife would take the bar exam, only for Jack to fail the exam while his wife passed. This failure would set about for him a brief period of depression. At home, he was loud and resentful towards his wife, jealous for the fact that she passed the bar and he did not. In order to improve his mood, Patricia Thompson would suggest that they attend the local church. It was here where Thompson first heard the preachings of Pastor Steve Brown, the popular preacher and professor of communication and theology at the Reformed Theological Seminary located in Orlando, Florida. It was through the words of Brown that Thompson became a born-again Christian, and Thompson would devote his entire life to helping the oppressed. Of course, we're not talking about volunteering at your local soup kitchen or speaking out against police brutality or racial profiling. No, for Jack, this would take the form of publicly and legally condemning anyone who did not meet his conservative Christian standards. Eventually, Jack Thompson would pass the bar exam 3 months after becoming a born-again Christian. One of his first jobs was selling Honeywell computers. This mostly consisted of cold calling various businesses to inquire if they needed a new computer or hardware. This didn't last long, as Jack thought the job was tiring and boring. In 1980, he landed his first gig as a lawyer for the Weyerhaeuser Corporation under their subsidiary, the Babcock Company. The company specialized in building affordable housing. Jack would handle the legal work involved in building the houses. While working as their legal consultant, Jack would move he and Patricia to the Babcock home in the middle-income area of Ventry. A year later, Jack quit his job and landed a position at Blackwell, Walker, Gray, Powers, Flick, and Lowell law firm. He worked directly under Samuel Powers, one of the most famous attorneys in Florida at the time. He was famously known for turning down a chance to represent President Richard Nixon during an impeachment trial. Thompson worked for this firm from 1981 to 1985. And while there, Thompson mostly worked on medical malpractice cases, mostly involving baby delivery cases that went wrong. While working medical malpractice cases such as these, Jack would gain a universal concern for the safety of children. One case he dealt with had to do with a doctor who improperly handled the birth of 2 twins. Originally, the doctor did not do an ultrasound, and he thought he was only delivering 1 baby girl. When the first delivery came out, the baby was a stillborn, and the doctors and the nurses tried to resuscitate the baby due to the breathing issues. However, since the doctor did not know the woman was giving birth to twins, he decided to halt any resuscitation attempts, and in a panic, he told the nurses to wrap the stillborn in a blanket and place it on a shelf so that attention could be given to the other twin. But later, after the second baby was born, they realized that the stillborn was still breathing despite the initial complications, and wrapping a blanket around it actually caused more damage, as the baby might now be permanently in a state of vegetation. Rather than face a possible malpractice suit, he instead told the nurses not to place the newborn in an incubator, but rather just leave it to die. Thankfully, the nurses disobeyed the doctor, and the baby was placed in the incubator and survived. In recalling this event in his life, Jack Thompson stated in his book In Harm's Way, "I learned just how far people within corporate structures will go to cover their tracks. More important, I learned that it takes just one person of faith to save a child, to do something courageous in the face of threats." Jack would essentially carry this mindset throughout the rest of his legal career. Much of the negative attention that he would gain had to do with his unspoken nature. In 1985, Thompson was officially fired from the firm. It's not clear why he left. He expresses in his book that it was due to internal politics, but he's generally vague about the details. He was apparently fired the very same year that Samuel Powers retired, and apparently Powers had been protecting Thompson whenever he so-called spoke the truth. After leaving, Thompson joined up with another legal firm in Miami. After a few weeks, he fell into another depression. And after speaking to a friend, he decided to become his own boss and become a freelance lawyer. For 2 years, Jack served a number of clients he had past business with during his days at Babcock. Around the time Jack became a freelance lawyer, the popular Miami radio show host Neil Rogers was conducting a small contest where male listeners were asked to send in pictures of themselves along with the type of sexual activity they enjoyed. This is at least what Thompson says about the whole affair. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when Jack's feud with the Neil Rogers show actually began, but in 1987, after listening to one episode of the program, which showcased a parody song titled "Boys Want Sex in the Morning," Jack decided to contact the station through a written letter complaining about the show's content.
Exercise their individual liberties by turning the dial.
They have a problem with that.
They've got a serious problem. One of them, of course, being John B. Thompson, attorney, who likes to call himself Jack, Jack of all trades.
Jack dash.
Don't say it.
I'm not, but
Don't
I'm
say
thinking
it.
it. I can think it.
Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Oh boy, we've got a lot of great lines for Jack. And of course, when somebody sends me a copy, as I received this morning, of a long, and this guy's an attorney. Oh boy, how'd you like to be on trial for your life? And all of a sudden, this guy in the middle of the courtroom would start doing a pirouette in front of the judge and get his crayons out. I mean, look at the attached personal note that I've got. It looks like a little kid got Crayolas out or something. The Monitor is out there.
Obviously a very busy attorney.
No question about it. He's obviously got a very busy practice and a very successful one. But getting back to yesterday, and of course, if you've been out of town, or if you've been listening to, what would they have been listening to? Bill McQuigg.
Out of town.
No, if they've been listening to Bill McQuigg, they know about it, because he did a whole couple of hours with Dr. Hoofenmouth
A lot of people,
Jr.
A lot of people are on vacation this time.
Exactly.
Of year and been gone.
And if you're just coming in this morning and wondering what it is that we're talking about, well, we seem to have a little problem here.
And in response, Neil Roger would read the letter over the air, along with his name, address, and phone number. According to a few sources from this time, Thompson would receive various death threats from listeners, while at the same time, Rogers continued to berate Thompson. Finally, Jack would contact the FCC, who would go on to fine the station $10,000 for playing what was considered to be an inappropriate song. After this happened, Jack began to complain more and more about the station in the public eye. He would ask Dade County State Attorney Janet Rio to prosecute the station that very same year for a violation of privacy, something the general attorney at the time was reluctant to do. In fact, she wanted nothing to do with Jack, but a little bit more on that later. The following year, the feud between Thompson and Neil Rogers continued. Thompson would sue the station for the violation of his privacy, while the station would countersue for harassment. In November of 1988, both parties agreed to end the feud and avoid court. They reached a settlement that Thompson would not call or harass the station anymore or publicly condemn the station. At the same time, the station had to agree not to mention Thompson at all during the Neil Rogers show. Each time Thompson was named, the station would have to pay him $5,000. And Thompson, by now, who was a dedicated listener, would continue to listen to the program and actually count the times his name was mentioned, which according to him was around 40,000 times, which would have added up to $20 million. Whether Jack actually got all this money is not clear, but he did make some profit out of this feud with the radio show. This was also the first time Jack's name was in the limelight. For the first time in his mostly regular career, Jack had some idea of what it was like to be a famous lawyer. Maybe for all the wrong reasons, but regardless, he felt like he was accomplishing something. As 1988 stretched on, Jack grew somewhat restless, and with the general attorney's decision not to prosecute the Neil Rogers show and the station, he decided then and there that he would make a much better attorney general, far more than Janet Rio, a lady he actually had past dealings with. In 1975, the year before he graduated law school, he actually interviewed for the position at the state attorney's office in Miami-Dade County, Florida. He was interviewed by the then acting assistant to the Dade County State Attorney, Richard Gerson, Janet Reno, who would be the future Attorney General and member of the Democratic Party. Within Thompson's own biography titled In Harm's Way, he gave readers insight into the first time he met Reno. In this interview, Reno asked Thompson to give his insight on 3 hypothetical crime investigations where the police acted improperly. She wanted to know if Thompson believed that the case should be thrown out or backed by the court. Thompson responded by stating that he believed in each scenario police were justified for their conduct. When asked if he was ever skeptical of police versions of the case, Thompson replied that it was the criminal defense lawyer's job to be skeptical. It was clear from the beginning that Thompson and Reno had different agendas as lawyers based on the interview. The interview instigated another feud as Thompson was not only upset he didn't get the job, but he would also end up hating the way Reno went about her business. And in the end, the interview left a sour taste in his mouth.
Think that I'm going to put that idiot on the air? Jack Thompson? He thinks he's going to go on the air? What was that? He hung it up?
Hey, Neil. Hey, Neil. How you doing, babe? Enjoying your job?
Yeah, see, now, anybody that would listen, I mean, here's an attorney. His name is John V. Thompson. I'm glad I put him on for a couple of seconds. And this guy is a mental case, who is in the process of harassing, he's an attorney in Coral Gables, harassing this, not just this program, the entire station, and the people in Portland are such Neanderthals. Anybody that would pay attention to a guy like this has got a serious problem, and they deserve each other. Mike Wolf is here with a headline. CBS has the news at 1, and we'll come back at 1:06.
In 1988, 1 year after the feud with the Neil Rogers Show, Thompson would appeal to Reno, who at the time was the acting prosecutor in Miami-Dade County, Florida. After Reno refused to fund the radio station, Thompson decided to run for prosecutor himself, and from there he began spreading rumors that Reno herself was a homosexual. Famously, at a campaign event in 1988, Thompson would pull Reno to the side and give her a letter. On this said letter, he instructed her to check off a box indicating that if she was a homosexual, bisexual, or heterosexual. In response, Reno replied to Jack by touching him on the shoulder and stating to him that she was only interested in virile men. That's why she wasn't attracted to him. And what did Jack do in response? Well, he ended up filing a battery charge for the shoulder touch. Reno would end up having the governor of Florida at the time, Bob Martinez, appoint a special prosecutor to look into the battery charge, only to find that there was indeed no criminal battery which took place. Thompson's actions stemmed from the fact that he never liked Janet Reno in the first place, but also for the fact that Reno was an easy target to condemn. Many people besides Thompson would attack her character for being an unmarried woman who did not have children. And Thompson, being the conservative Christian, did not like the fact that a woman of Reno's caliber was in such an important position. Jack Thompson would end up losing the election, but that didn't keep him from going after Reno. His next target by 1990 was the Switchboard of Miami, a local social services group which Reno was a board member of. And this year, he would accuse the group of distributing homosexual education tapes to public schools. Thompson naturally could never confirm this, but he continued to circulate rumors nonetheless. Eventually, it led to the Switchboard getting the Supreme Court of Florida involved in ordering Jack to submit to a psychiatric examination. An examination which he did in fact pass, and to this day, he claims to be the only certified sane lawyer in the entire state of Florida. In 1989, Thompson would gain the spotlight for the third time, publicly attacking hip-hop group 2 Live Crew after the release of their third album, As Nasty As They Wanna Be. Thompson would use his influence as a lawyer to investigate legal inquiries into whether the album violated Florida state obscenity laws. These laws specifically banned the sale of any obscene materials to minors, and his efforts weren't just tied to Florida. He would eventually take the time to cold call and send letters to all major retailers across the nation in order to get the album pulled off the shelves. And in some places, the album was considered illegal to sell altogether, and retailers who violated the law would face fines and imprisonment. In one particular case, Charles Freeman, a local retailer in Florida, was arrested for selling the album in his record store.
Charles Freeman knew he was breaking the law when he sold this album, Nasty As They Wanna Be, to a customer this morning.
Why am I buying the tape? Well, I don't know.
Because he was an undercover cop, and just like a drug bust, moments after the sale went down, several Broward Sheriff deputies rushed into EC Records in northwest Fort Lauderdale and arrested its owner.
America is free for everybody. And as long as this is America and I'm not living in Cuba, I feel my rights are violated.
This is the only album banned in Broward. Despite that, Freeman continued selling the records and tapes and challenged Sheriff Nick Navarro to arrest him for it.
Around this time, Jack adopted the strange habit of mailing a picture of Batman attached to a copy of his driver's license. The picture was to remind his opponents that he was acting as the Caped Crusader and trying to better society. What exactly did Jack have to gain by attacking the 2 Live crew? Well, according to him, their sexually charged lyrics were more harmful than good, as they painted women in a negative and obscene way. To him, the lyrics of Luther Campbell, who he would later refer to as the Joker, promoted the idea that women could be sexually abused. It could also have to do with the fact that Luther Campbell was a supporter of Janet Reno during the 1988 election. When the album bans began to affect the group's profits, and consequently after they were arrested during a live performance at Club Future in Hollywood, Florida, tensions really boiled over. The 2 Live crew would face conviction for violating Florida obscenity laws. Initially, the court did rule that the album was obscene, but after an appeal, the decision was reversed and the 2 Live crew was declared not guilty. The entire controversy, while detrimental to the group financially, actually helped As Nasty as They Wanna Be sell well over 2 million copies, along with becoming the 3rd best-selling R&B and hip-hop album. As Nasty as They Wanna Be would be remembered as one of the only albums that was flat-out banned in the music industry. In 1992, Thompson continued his attack on the music industry when he was hired by the Washington-based Freedmen Alliance, headed by Oliver North, the former presidential administrator. Thompson would be hired in July of 1992 in order to bring up charges against Time Warner, based on federal laws against seditious conspiracy and advocating the overthrow of the government. Both acts were considered felonies and punishable up to 20 years. But what could have Time Warner done to have been accused of these charges? Well, 1992 was the year that rapper Ice-T released his single Cop Killer on his metal rock album Body Count.
In the wake of the Rodney King verdict and the civil unrest in Los Angeles, some police officers across the country now say they're feeling threatened by the lyrics of a rap song. James Hattori in Dallas has our report.
As a self-proclaimed gangster rapper, Ice-T plays to raw emotion and outrageous themes. But today, a group of Texas police officers condemned one of his latest songs, Cop Killer, as an invitation to commit murder.
The song itself criticized the then acting President George H.W. Bush along with his administration. It also provided commentary on the corrupt and unethical practices of the LAPD. Time Warner was forced to pull Ice-T's album off the shelves in order to save face value. The album would be released again, but with the song Cop Killer removed. In 1990, Jack Thompson set his sights on artist Madonna for her single, Justify My Love. He claimed that the music video objectified women and portrayed them as sex objects. Thompson labeled the music video as an example of corporate pollution. His challenges with the music industry would further escalate in the future agreements regarding the censorship of media. Ultimately, many ask the question, can the suppression of free speech and expression be considered unconstitutional if people find that the message is harmful to society in the first place? For Jack Thompson and many others, freedom of speech and expression should take a backseat to public safety and moral values. And he would carry this mode of thought in challenging the video game industry.
It's been 25 years since the shooting at Heath High School. The victims and their families waiting for this day. The parole board ruling this morning that Michael Carneal will serve out his life sentence.
In December of 1997, 14-year-old Michael Carneal fired a Ruger Mk2 .22 caliber pistol at school, killing 3 students and injuring 5. He was arrested and charged with manslaughter. In October of 1998, he would plead guilty for the crime, claiming that he was mentally ill. Under a plea agreement, the judge gave him a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Under the agreement, he would receive mental health treatment. The following year, Jack Thompson sought out the parents of the three victims and began work in filing a $33 million lawsuit against various video game and film companies. Thompson would argue that Carneal was inspired by the media he consumed to commit the act of murder, as investigations into the home of Michael Carneal revealed that the youth regularly played video games such as the popular id Software first-person shooters, Doom and Quake, along with Capcom's Resident Evil. The investigation also found one movie Carneal apparently watched regularly, The Basketball Diaries, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, a film remembered for its controversial school shooting scene and drug usage. Along with arguing that Carneal learned his behavior from the consumption of violent media, Thompson will also claim product liability for making what he perceived as defective products. The suit filed in Kentucky in 1998 would be dismissed as Thompson failed to have a recognizable claim with any real supported evidence. The court would state that product liability is irrelevant to the case, since the defendants, being the makers of games and movies, could not have foreseen what Carneal would do. The case of Michael Carneal basically paints a picture and provides insight into how Jack Thompson would conduct himself and become more and more of a controversial public figure. In simple terms, Thompson would use the emotional trauma connected to public shootings and murders in order to get recognized and paid as a public crusader acting on the behalf of the victims' families. At the same time, he could challenge and constantly try to hinder one of the biggest and fastest growing video game publishers and video game developers of the 21st century. I'm of course speaking about Rockstar Games and Take-Two Interactive. In a way, Rockstar and Take-Two, with the release of the GTA series, the Manhunt series, and a few other titles such as The Warriors and Bully, made Jack Thompson's career as a public celebrity. Video games throughout the 21st century would become his primary focus, as he could make plenty of money representing victims, while at the same time gaining attention and public fame. Jack would also develop this habit of contacting and sending hateful letters and emails to anyone who pissed him off. Let's take this time to cover each and every one of these individual cases that Jack Thompson was a part of between 2003 and 2007. In February of 2003, 16-year-old Dustin Lynch of Medina County, Ohio, was charged with aggravated murder for killing Jolie Mishu. Apparently, Lynch was obsessed with Grand Theft Auto 3 so much that he was inspired to shoot and kill Jolie Mishu. Being that Jack Thompson could only practice law where he was certified, he actually got himself what was referred to as a amicus curiae, which basically allows a lawyer to practice law outside their registered state where they passed the bar exam. This would happen with pretty much every case Thompson was involved in. When Thompson discovered that Lynch was being tried as an adult in Ohio, he was still waiting for his request to be approved by the acting judge, Christopher Collier. Meanwhile, he passed a message from Mishu's father to the judge asserting that the attorneys had to tell the jury about the violent video game which trained Lynch. This violent video game, which was allegedly found in Lynch's home, was Grand Theft Auto 3, which by then had become one of the most played games in the nation following its release 2 years prior. It's pretty strange that Jack would try to instruct the judge on details of the case while at the same time demanding the judge to instruct the attorneys regarding the facts that would be brought up in the case. But moving on, it seems that Jack wanted to use this argument in order to represent Lynch during his trial. The only thing is, he had already spoken to the victim's father regarding matters of the case. So for him to represent Lynch would be kind of conflicting since he had already advised the victim's parents. Thompson would further conflict interests by also contacting Geraldine Thomas, mother of Dustin Lynch, in order to arrange that he defend her son. After about 2 months of delay, Thompson would contact Medina County Common Pleas and demand for Judge Collier to remove himself from the case since he was so late in granting Thompson his request. As the trial got closer to commencing, Lynch along with his mother would change their minds and dismiss Jack Thompson as their acting attorney. The next two cases Jack was involved in occurred between 2003 and 2004. In Tennessee, two teenage stepbrothers, William and Joshua Buckner, ages 16 and 14, of Newport, Tennessee, shot and killed motorist Aaron Hamble and injured passenger Kimberly Bede. The brothers fired their shotguns on Route 40 towards Knoxville, Tennessee. The two teens were arrested and pleaded guilty to reckless homicide and endangerment. In the summer of 2004, teenager Warren LeBlanc of Leicestershire, England, an avid player of Manhunt, beat teenager Stefan Paccaron to death with a hammer and stabbed him repeatedly with a knife. LeBlanc was arrested and pleaded guilty to murder. In both cases, two popular Rockstar games were pointed to as the main cause of the teens' reckless behavior. Upon being questioned, the Buckner brothers told police that they were trying to emulate the actions in Grand Theft Auto 3. Following the arrest, the family of the deceased Aaron Hamble hired Jack Thompson to act on their behalf in the Hamble vs. Sony lawsuit. This was a $246 million lawsuit filed against Take-Two, Rockstar, and Walmart for designing, marketing, and retailing Grand Theft Auto 3. The lawsuit was announced soon after the Buckner brothers were given an indefinite term in state custody. After the arrest of Warren LeBlanc, several sources alleged that LeBlanc was trained to kill Stefan Paccaron after playing the video game Manhunt. Upon being arrested, he stated, "I didn't intend to kill at first, but when I saw the blood, I just let go and hit more times." LeBlanc would plead guilty to murder in a Leicestershire Crown Court in July of 2004. The murder happened inside the home and room of Paccaron, the location where police discovered the game inside the PS2 owned by Paccaron. Now, I should say that it was never confirmed that LeBlanc was in fact obsessed with Manhunt, as he didn't even own a copy. In one article, Stefan's mother, Gasil Paccaron, claimed that LeBlanc was, I quote, "inherently an evil murderer who was obsessed with the game." She also stated, "I don't play these games, but if they are influencing kids to go out and kill people, then you don't want them on the shelves." More than likely, she speculated this fact based on what people already knew about the game, and the media, upon hearing about the potential link, simply overblew it. The police would later deny any link between the game and the murder. It was later found that the murder was actually related to a robbery attempt. Upon hearing about the incident, though, Jack Thompson set out once again. He got in contact with the Paccaron family, and they hired him with the aim of suing Rockstar and Sony for $50 million in a wrongful death claim. By the end of 2004, Jack Thompson was representing two families in two separate lawsuits against Take-Two, Rockstar, and Sony, both of which he would in fact lose, but he still managed to collect a retainer fee. Regardless if Jack won the cases or not, more and more negative spotlight were being placed on video game developers for depictions of graphic violence. Meanwhile, Jack Thompson's views related to violence and the potential of copycat behavior from video games was gaining both acclaim and
Psychological Association in August of 2005 issued a blockbuster report which says that there's a direct causal link between interactive gameplay of violent games and real-world increased aggression and violence in adolescents and teenagers. So, you know, your poll of your viewers, who are mostly gamers, is interesting.
Of course,
but
now,
it flies in the face of all the science and all the medicine.
True. Now, Adam, now that study that Jack is referring to said there was a link.
Yeah,
there are other studies that came out that said it also shows that, you know, violent people tend to like violent images, which was also represented in that same study. Do you believe that bully is going to be responsible for an increase in any violent crimes?
No, it's on the face of it kind of preposterous. And you know what? It's actually really disturbing and intellectually dishonest and somewhat pernicious to try to say that with all the other ills in the world, where you have kids that are getting absolutely poor education in public schools, where they're not getting good medical care given to our healthcare system, and with the fact that people can't seem to get a decent job, though, what is causing trouble among America's youth in schools? Oh, it has to be a video game. Anyone of thought should find that insulting at the face of it.
So the solution to bad grades is for kids to spend more time playing video games?
Bad
is that
grades?
your answer?
We are talking about violence. I believe that there are greater reasons for the social ills of adolescent violence than playing a video game, because I believe that violence was existing prior to the release of even Pong.
Mark, what do you think about this?
Know,
Have video games led to this huge disturbance? Is bullying going to be responsible for violent crime in schools?
In various TV interviews and debates, Jack would drone on about scientific studies which link video games to the correlation of aggressive behavior in teens. Despite having absolutely no background or training in psychology, much less child psychology, Jack would express his views relentlessly, and this would overall lead to his eventual disbarment, but much on that later. In 2005, Jack Thompson's radar was fully on Take-Two Interactive. He involved himself in not just the controversial court cases, but also in a bid to ban a newly announced game, along with trying to recall a despised one. Let's go back a few years in Fayette, Alabama, home to Devin Moore, a teenager who one day decided to steal a car and was arrested for Grand Theft Auto. While being booked, he was somehow able to grab a hold of a gun and kill 2 police officers and a dispatcher. He then fled the scene and escaped in a cop car. Upon later being apprehended in the state of Mississippi, he would state that life is a video game. Everybody's gotta die sometime. It was later discovered that Moore was an avid player of the popular Rockstar game Grand Theft Auto Vice City. At least that's what was considered to be evidence at the time. And naturally, Jack Thompson got himself involved in the case, sometime after Moore was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder. He made himself a part of the legal team that would prove that Vice City was responsible for the murders committed by Devin Moore. Around this time, he was featured on 60 Minutes for a special. On this particular episode, Jack would be given a full segment explaining his absurd logic behind the GTA defense. This made for pretty good TV at the time, but few people could actually take him seriously, particularly when discussing Devin Moore, a person who was later found to have suffered from severe PTSD and emotional trauma.
Are you saying that Devin Moore shot 3 people in the head because of a video game?
What we're saying is that Devin Moore was, in effect, trained to do what he did. He was given a murder simulator. He bought it as a minor. He played it hundreds of hours, which is primarily a cop killing game. It's our theory, which we think we can prove to a jury in Alabama, that but for the video game training, he would not have done what he did.
While this was all going on, Jack was also given his intake on a prevalent hot coffee mod scandal connected to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. This mod, created by Dutch programmer Patrick Wildenborg, activated a previously inaccessible sex minigame. The mod was available for the PC version of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and since Wildenborg used the source code from the PS2 game to create the mod, Rockstar and Take-Two were held responsible. As a result, the game's initial M rating was changed to an adult-only rating until Rockstar made the necessary changes. Rockstar will also catch the attention of the Federal Trade Commission, who accused them of manipulating the rating system to sell Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. In July 2005, Jack Thompson sent out an open letter to the members of the Electronic Software Association. He also sent this letter to various developers and publishers in the video game industry. In this letter, he went on about his contributions of drawing attention to violent video games. He also spent some time attacking the then head of the Electronic Software Association, Doug Lowenstein, who denied the severity of the hot coffee mod and took no action against Rockstar. Thompson stated in his letter the following: "Instead of acting like a responsible adult by trying to get to the bottom of the scandal, Doug Lowenstein did what he has always done at the ESA. He has first said there is no problem, and then he has embarked on his scorched earth policy to try to discredit anyone who suggests there is a problem. Lowenstein has unleashed his PR, Hillary and Ruin squad on respected and powerful legislators like California Assemblyman Yee, also a psychologist, who has expressed concerns about Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and the mod scandal. Lowenstein's approach, as always, is to question Assemblyman Yee's motives. No opponent could possibly be acting upon principle. In the world, according to Doug Lowenstein, only he is the oracle of truth. All others are scum." Doug Lowenstein, like many others, generally ignored the letter, but Jack once again had his face in the spotlight. He would continue his letter writing campaign the following month, in a letter sent to 2 Minnesota judges regarding the sale of GTA San Andreas in retail stores. Within this letter, he encouraged the judges to enforce the Minnesota Statute 617291 and force the Minnesota-based retailer Target to pull the game off the shelf. And this was already after he contacted the CEO of Target to pull the game off the shelf. There are plenty of other emails that began surfacing this time. Lots involved Jack Thompson spreading numerous lies regarding San Andreas and a few other Rockstar games. He wrote a few letters to Senators Hillary Clinton and Joseph Lieberman, who at the time were pushing the Federal Trade Commission to investigate Rockstar and the ESRB's rating system. Another senator he wrote was Senator Leland Yee, a future senator who would be responsible for trying to pass legislation against the sale of violent video games in the state of California. In his letter, he focused a lot of attention on EA games and their popular Sims video game series. Thompson made various claims that players could remove censor flags to make the characters in the game nude. He also mentioned that there were various mods offered on porn sites that can be used for the Sims games. In another letter to Patricia Vance, president of the ESRB, he accused the ESRB of conducting a criminal conspiracy to distribute sexually harmful material to minors. If Jack Thompson wasn't busy enough, he got himself involved in protesting the release of the Rockstar game Bully. Jack was notable for labeling Bully as a Columbine simulator, which, if you know anything about Columbine and have even watched a trailer of Bully, well, that was completely absurd. Jack would lead lawsuits suing Walmart, Best Buy, GameStop, and several other retailers across the country in order to get the game Bully banned and away from the shelves. And around this time, he was gaining more popularity among various groups. One of the most interesting was the anti-violence group known as the Peaceaholics, who shared a similar agenda in seeing violent video games pulled off the shelves. And he would also help the group lead a protest in front of Rockstar Games' home office in New York City. In his own Miami-Dade County, he successfully got the school board to pass a resolution to urge retailers not to sell the game to minors. To further his efforts against Bully, he personally wrote Bill Gates of all people to discourage him from releasing Bully on the Xbox, which was never actually planned in the first place. In fact, due to the negative attention brought on by Thompson, Rockstar was forced to delay the game's release until 2006.
One clever modder, Madagus, has taken Jack Thompson's book and turned it into a PS2. And the first game he used to test his creation was, geniusly, Grand Theft Auto. Beyond spitting in the face of this renowned anti-gaming lawyer, this mod is also a pretty compact way to store your PS2. It's just a shame Madagus had to actually buy a copy of the book to make it.
In October of 2005, Thompson would reach a new height in gaining public attention. He would issue what was referred to as a modest video game proposal. He challenged any game developer to make a murder simulator where Paul Ebler, the CEO of Take-Two Interactive, is to be killed in the most disturbing and violent way possible. He said if anyone did this, he would donate $10,000 of his own money to the CEO's favorite charity. At the time, Thompson seemed pretty serious, but he didn't anticipate that someone would actually take this challenge up, when in fact a small group of indie developers would step in and actually create a game that was a murder simulator. This particular year was rocky and exciting for Jack. I believe it's truly this year where he really reached his pinnacle of fame. But it was also the year that he would begin his sharp decline from not just the limelight, but also his legal profession. While reading about Jack, it's sometimes hard to imagine that he is a lawyer, since no rational lawyer who likes to win cases, or a lawyer that keeps their client's best interests in mind, acts the way Jack did. And his true nature really did surface during the Strickland vs. Sony case. Just to recall, this was the case involving the families of the victims who were involved in the Devin Moore shooting. But months before the trial could actually commence, Jack Thompson was sending out once again various emails that were released on websites, commenting and giving details on the civil trial. In his emails, he would compare Sony and Take-Two's selling of Grand Theft Auto games to the attack of Pearl Harbor during World War II, And with less than a month before the trial could even start, Thompson made the habit of attacking and threatening lawyers who worked under Take-Two's legal representatives at Blank Rome. Jim Smith, an attorney employed by Blank Rome, stated in one article that Thompson was trying to poison the community by leaking evidence. Eventually, Thompson would be ejected from the case altogether for his sheer unprofessional conduct, and the case would eventually be thrown out, as Jim Smith would argue that video games themselves deserve to be protected by the First Amendment. And furthermore, Jack Thompson and the other acting attorneys could not actually establish if the makers of the game intended Moore to commit the acts. Thompson notably failed in getting his product liability claim recognized as well. And at the end of the day, Moore was held responsible for his actions, and he would receive the death penalty that very year for his acts. Around October of 2006, Rockstar North was nearly finished and ready to release Bully. However, Jack had other plans. He filed a public nuisance lawsuit against Walmart, Take-Two Interactive, and GameStop, demanding that he be allowed to preview the game before it was released. Rockstar happily obliged his request. On October 12th, Jack Thompson and acting judge Ronald Freeman of Miami-Dade County Circuit Court both sat down in the judge's chamber with a PS2 and a copy of Bully and played the game. At the time, Bully had been given a teen rating, and Thompson wanted to see the rating switched to a M for mature rating to prevent children from playing it. Regardless of Thompson's views, Judge Freeman found no fault in the game whatsoever. He later stated in an article that the game was not bad enough to merit taking action against it, and the nuisance complaint that was filed with it was dismissed. For this, Thompson would turn his attention to now condemning Judge Freeman openly. He claimed that the judge didn't actually see the entire game and evaded most of the violent parts. Now, if you actually played Bully, you know this game is pretty long and consists of around 5 different parts. When Thompson and Freeman played the game, they only had about an hour to actually make their decision. It's rumored that Rockstar provided a cheat code to advance through the game, but I don't know if this was ever confirmed. But back to Jack. Jack claimed that the cheat allowed Rockstar to gloss over the most violent parts of the game, despite the fact that it was the first time anyone outside the company was playing the game on an actual console. It's not like Jack actually knew the premise of the game. And Jack's behavior in the courtroom and his treatment of the defense attorneys and the judge would cause him to be removed from another case. Judge Freeman would even go a step further in filing a formal complaint against Thompson and the Florida State Bar, stating that his behavior was inappropriate before and during the trial. Despite 2005 and 2006 being the major low points of Jack's career by then, there is no doubt that his crusade did make some lasting impact. At the very beginning of 2005, various states were trying to pass legislation against the sale of violent video games to minors. States such as Illinois, Georgia, Indiana, Missouri, and Washington. Jack Thompson himself would even help write the legislation against the sale of violent video games to minors in the state of Louisiana. Despite major opposition from various game companies, the bill was able to pass by the Louisiana State House and was approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee. However, the ESA would in turn file a lawsuit against the bill, and the law was blocked by a district judge who issued a preliminary injunction, thus making the bill not really that impactful. Beginning in 2006, the newest murder simulator was released completely for free on Windows. Remember Jack's modest video game proposal? The game where you had to kill CEO of Take-Two, Paul Ebler? A game that, if made, Jack would have donated $10,000 of his own money to Ebler's favorite charity? Well, in 2006, a small group of game makers consisting of Derek Yu, Chris Hansen, Philip P. Jones, Alec Holowak, and Christopher Howard Wolf, under the name of Thompson Soft, released I'm OK, a murder simulator. I'm OK was a 16-bit side-scrolling game where you played as a father on a quest for revenge after his son is brutally gunned down. The father isn't actually after the murderer. No, that guy's in jail. Instead, a shadowy figure convinces the father to go after the creators of the violent video game which drove the man to kill his son. After all, it was the game which drove him to shoot the father's son. So basically, you just go around and murder everyone and everything in your path. The game truly was a tribute to the classic side-scroller with an obvious budget. Overall, I'm Okay was a satirical response to Jack's challenge. I mean, after all, the game is called a murder simulator, a overblown buzz term drummed up by Jack and the media. I actually think this game would have been good enough to release on Steam, but that's not really saying a whole lot, considering that Steam will release just about anything. When I'm Okay actually did come out, Jack would of course play off his offer as a joke. Who knows if he even had $10,000 available to donate. Since Jack failed to back up his end, Jerry Hawkins and Mike Krolulik, the creators of the game and webcomic Penny Arcade, stepped in and wrote a check for Child's Play, an organization that donates toys and games to children's hospitals. When writing the check, they included a memo stating, "For Jack Thompson, because Jack Thompson won't." This must have been pretty embarrassing for Jack, as he would follow up by calling the Seattle police and FBI to investigate Hawkins and Krolulik for criminal harassment. Yeah, once again, Jack found himself in another feud, as a few of the Penny Arcade comics would surface at a time that referenced Jack Thompson. Jack never would find himself a part of another legal team representing the victim in a wrongful death. After 2005, his reputation as an attorney was pretty much in the sinkhole, but nonetheless he continued his crusade against violent video games. At the very beginning of 2006, Jack found himself clashing with the Florida State Bar this time. His feud with the bar can be traced all the way back to 1993 when he accused them of promoting a pro-gay, humanist, and liberal agenda that conflicted with his religious beliefs. There aren't a lot of details regarding this incident, but surprisingly, Jack sued the Florida State Bar, and the case was settled out of court with Jack receiving a $20,000 settlement. As far as I'm concerned, this is really one of the only cases that Jack has ever won, or even made out reasonably well. After Strickland vs. Sony, the Florida State Bar found out about his behavior during the trial, and from there they would begin an investigation into all his email correspondence, letters, and baseless complaints. Not just for video games, but also for harassing the Howard Stern show, or giving details on cases to news outlets and press releases. Most importantly, for just unprofessional conduct overall. For these reasons, the Florida State Bar decides to look into Jack Thompson personally and consider whether he should be disbarred. In January 2006, he contacted the Justice Department to investigate the Florida Bar's actions. In one letter written to Alex Acosta, interim of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, he wrote the following: "The Florida Bar and its agents have engaged in a documented pattern of this illegal activity, which may sink to the level of criminal racketeering activity, in a knowing and illegal effort to child my federal First Amendment rights." What's the definition of irony? The expression of one's meaning by using language that normally signifies the opposite, typically for humorous or emphatic effect, or a situation or an event that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects and is often amusing as a result. In this case, Jack, who is never opposed to ignoring First Amendment rights regarding expression, is complaining about the Florida State Bar suppressing his First Amendment rights. I guess the situation is no more ironic than Jack Thompson creating the premise for a violent murder simulator video game. But I digress.
The authorities are going to have to do, besides seizing this assailant's computer, is also look for the entertainment materials which the FBI and the Secret Service up to and through Columbine found to be the one common denominator, and that is these perpetrators' rehearsal on these mass murder games that allows them to be more efficient.
Around April 16, 2007, Jack Thompson, in the aftermath of the Virginia Tech shooting, would wrongfully speculate that undergraduate student Sung-Hoo Choi, who killed 32 people along with injuring 17 others, was inspired to commit the shooting after playing the popular first-person shooter Counter-Strike. Thompson would go on NBC's Hardball and state that Cho had been immersed with the game while in college. A week later, investigators found that Cho did not play Counter-Strike or any video games on his computer. When investigating his dorm, there were no video games or much less a console to be found. And here was Jack once again arrogantly giving his take on the tragic incident. Thompson would follow up his attention grabbing by getting himself involved in two other public shooting cases. One being Robert Hawkins of Omaha, Nebraska, the other being Stephen Kazmierczak of Northern Illinois University. In the Omaha shooting, Thompson would try to initially leash onto the case as the prosecuting attorney. He would end up filing a suit against the police chief in order to get an inventory of all the violent entertainment which belonged to Robert Hawkins. In Illinois, Thompson linked the shooting caused by Kazmierczak to the game Counter-Strike once again. And during the investigation, Thompson would claim that we have a nation of majority candidate video gamers out there who are ready and willing and able to massacre, and some of them will. Throughout the many news programs I watched while making this video, I wonder what exactly made Thompson look like such an opinionated expert on violent video games. After reading one article covering his opinion on the Tech Massacre, well, it's plain that the news correspondents who interview him and talk with him haven't really the slightest idea or understanding of video games or video game culture. And with that, he's really able to sound like an expert since the other person has no idea what they're talking about.
Tell me, based on your experience, what some of the initial questions have to be on the part of these parents of these students.
Well, there are a lot of factors. Typically, the school shooters train literally on video games to do this. Dawson College last year, Montreal, the shooter, the killer, trained on a game called Super Columbine Massacre. Also Postal 2, both of which are murder simulation games in which the school shooters can rehearse and plan for and make themselves more efficient in these kind of murderous rampages. Jeffrey Weiss of Red Lake, Minnesota, a year and a half ago. He trained on Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I spoke with the FBI agent in charge there, and he said he could tell by the surveillance videos that he had basically done this before. He could tell his heart rate was below 60 beats per minute. He trained on a mass murder game, as I said, Grand Theft Auto. I represented the parents in Paducah, Kentucky. Michael Carneal, aged 14, trained on the game Doom. We went on NBC a week before Columbine. Matt Lauer asked me, what do you fear based upon what you learned in Paducah? And I said, we fear that there are going to be more of these by kids trained on the same game. Klebold and Harris trained on the game Doom to kill 12.
Let's now discuss two more video game controversies which Jack got himself involved in around this time. In the summer of 2006, when Rockstar Games officially announced Manhunt 2, Jack took to the media outlets once again in protesting against the release of the game. In one article, Jack provided background information regarding the creation of Manhunt 2. The original Manhunt was responsible for the bludgeoning death of a British youth by his friend who obsessively played the game. The killer used a hammer just as in the game he played. Take-Two Rockstar, anticipating the firestorm of criticism with the release of the Murder Simulator sequel, is lying to the public on both sides of the pond and stating this week that the game had nothing to do with the murder. Take-Two is also stating that the sun does not rise in the east because Take-Two makes no money from its rising in the east. Take-Two has been repeatedly found in the US by the federal government to be guilty of fraud. So what would one expect it to say? Later that year, not surprising at all, Jack would file a public nuisance complaint against Take-Two Interactive. The complaint would not only address Manhunt 2, but also the latest entry in Rockstar's flagship series, Grand Theft Auto 4, which Jack had gone on public record comparing the game to outbreaks of polio. Manhunt 2, due to its graphic depictions of violence, would be delayed and censored for Take-Two to get an M rating. In some places, like the UK, the game was temporarily banned until it was approved by the Video Appeals Committee in 2008. In March of 2007, Take-Two finally decided that they had enough of Jack Thompson. In a surprising turn of events, well, not that surprising, the corporation actually filed a public nuisance suit against the Florida state lawyer. The suit alleged that Thompson's public nuisance tactics had violated their First Amendment rights. The lawyers working for Take-Two argued that the Florida statute in which Thompson is seeking to have games declared as nuisances makes him the private attorney general on behalf of the state of Florida. Take-Two also wanted compensation for the previous legal costs brought on by Jack's countless lawsuits. Additionally, Take-Two would pension the U.S. District Court of Southern Florida to block all impending lawsuits on the grounds that video games were purchased for private entertainment and could not be considered public nuisances. On March 21, 2007, Jack Thompson countersued, accusing Take-Two of violating the RICO Act of all things and selling violent video games. This would have been an interesting case to cover if it had actually gone to court, but it was settled with Thompson agreeing not to harass Take-Two anymore or try to sue the company or try to block their sales. But that didn't keep Jack Thompson completely distant from the dealings of Take-Two or the major companies releasing Manhunt 2 for their respective consoles. Manhunt 2 was one of the first M-rated games to be featured on the Nintendo Wii console, a console where the player mimics moves in a video game using motion detecting controllers. Since Manhunt 2 was being offered on the Wii, players would in fact be performing all kill moves using motion detecting controllers. Well, that did not sit right with Jack. After the whole affair with Take-Two died down, Thompson turned his attention to the upcoming Wendy's promotion, featuring toys designed after Nintendo Wii games. He then decided to write a letter to Wendy's CEO, Cheryl Anderson, where he demanded that the restaurant drop the upcoming promotion. The CEO naturally ignored this, so what does Jack do? Well, he sends another letter, this time to Florida Attorney General Bill McCollum and Governor Charlie Crest, which stated, Florida retailers are scheduled to sell a violent video game called Manhunt 2, which will be available remarkably for play on a kids-friendly Nintendo Wii gaming platform. The Wii device does not utilize traditional push-button game controllers, but instead utilizes handheld motion capture controllers. It's a training device. As I stated before, Jack has the habit of contacting people he has no business contacting in the first place. In various cases, he would conflict interest by communicating and talking to the opposite side he represented. He would send letters out to CEOs with just the vague speculations of their involvement with any controversial issue he found himself a part of. And he was never hesitant to cry wolf about anybody who opposed him. Jack would follow the Manhunt 2 debacle throughout the rest of the year, while also paying special attention to the release of Grand Theft Auto 4. Somehow he was able to find out about the special mission where you had to assassinate a lawyer based upon his character. He would actually go on to write a letter to the mother of the Take-Two chairman, Strauss Zellick, titled GTA Murder Simulator. In that letter, he criticized Zellick's upbringing and compared his time in the Boy Scouts to that of the Hitler Youth Camp. We now enter 2008. Jack Thompson's legal suit against the Florida State Bar is still going on. In 2008, the Florida Supreme Court ordered Thompson to show cause as to why it should not reject future court findings from him unless they are signed by another member of the bar. But much of what he presented wasn't anything that helped him. In March of 2008, the Florida Supreme Court imposed various sanctions on Thompson, one particularly that any filings for the court have to be signed by another Florida bar member. In May of 2008, Miami-Dade County Judge David Tunis found Jack Thompson guilty of 27 of the 32 violations he had been accused of by the Florida bar. This was determined after reviewing over 2,000 pages of transcripts and exhibits regarding Thompson's affairs over the last decade or so. This included making false statements to newspapers, disparaging and harassing other lawyers, and improperly practicing law outside of the state of Florida. After the judge made his ruling for disbarment, Jack filed a motion with the Supreme Court of Florida to get Tunis thrown out of the case, but that only added fuel to his eventual firing. In the following month, prosecutor Sheila Tuma called for a permanent disbarment and a fine for over $40,000 for the following: cumulative misconduct, a repeated pattern of behavior relentlessly forced upon numerous unconnected individuals, a total lack of remorse or even slight acknowledgement of inappropriate conduct, and continued behavior consistent with previous public reprimand over a very extended period of time involving a number of totally unrelated cases and individuals. The respondent has demonstrated a pattern of conduct to strike out harshly, extensively, repeatedly, and willfully to simply try to bring as much difficulty, distraction, and anguish to those he considers in opposition to his causes. He does not proceed within the guidelines of appropriate professional behavior, but rather uses other means available to intimidate, harass, or bring public disrepute to those whom he perceives oppose him. On September 25, 2008, Jack Thompson will be permanently disbarred from practicing law in Florida. He was given 30 days to close out his practice. He would never practice law again. But of course, that didn't keep him from gaining the public spotlight whenever it suited him. On September 29, 2009, Thompson filed a lawsuit against the social media website Facebook in the U.S. District Court of Southern Florida. And in case you were wondering, no, he did not have any tangible evidence signed by an actual attorney. He claimed that the negative comments written towards him caused him a great deal of harm and distress. However, the case was thrown out as for the U.S. Communication Decency Act states that companies such as Facebook are not liable for what users do with their services. After 2008, Jack Thompson would gradually shift away from the limelight. Occasionally, he would publicly air his opinions on popular and violent video games, but for the most part, his days as a public figure were over. Jack Thompson's career as an attorney is one of profound interest. Much of this history revolves around his attempts to control the actions and activities of others, along with trying to police or censor what he saw as immoral or corrupt. Jack never would change his beliefs, and despite being disbarred and silenced, he remains a major opponent against the video game industry. Hey y'all, thank you for watching. This is the first time I ever attempted a video of this scale. And given that there isn't a lot of information out there on Jack Thompson, I'm sure I left out a few facts or even stated a few facts you might not agree with. Let me know what you think in the comments section. And until next time, thank you for watching and supporting the channel.
The video game industry gave him a cranial menu that popped up in the blink of an eye in that police station, and that menu offered him the split-second decision to kill the officers, shoot them in the head, flee in a police car, just as the game itself trained him to do.